I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 3 weeks, not since the surgery, not since the world went eerily quiet. But when the ringing stopped, when the hush finally lifted, I didn't tell her my hearing had come back. Not yet. Something told me to wait. That decision, small as it seemed, would rip open the last lie tethering us. Because the moment I heard her speak again, I wished I hadn't. She wasn't crying for me. She wasn't whispering prayers or playing piano like she used to. She was on the phone, her voice sharp, mocking, unmistakable. "He's a deaf old fool. I'll have the condo, the trust, the company, all before he realizes what hit him. And Laz says once he's in the ground, I get it all clean." Laz. The name burned like acid in my ears. My late husband's protege. My daughter's secret weapon. My betrayer. It didn't matter that my body had healed. Something in me shattered in that moment. The kind of break that doesn't scar over. The kind that makes you rebuild from bone. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 3 weeks. Not since the surgery. Not since the world collapsed into a vacuum of white, endless silence. And in that strange quiet, I found a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. No ticking clocks, no car horns, no whispered betrayals. Just me, myself, and memory. Dahlia visited me the day after the operation. Her perfume hit first, a cloying, syrupy blend she knew I hated. Then her smile, polished, practiced, too wide, curved across her face like it had been rehearsed in a mirror. "Hi, Dad," she said slowly, as if I were not just deaf, but dull. "You look great." She barely glanced at me. Her gaze roamed over the penthouse Julian and I designed together, years before Dahlia became someone I no longer recognized. Before Julian's funeral, before everything fractured, Micah, my closest friend and lawyer, had warned me. "She's circling, Elliot. Not like family, like a shark." I didn't want to believe him. But grief doesn't blind you. Love does. Julian had adopted Dahlia when she was 6. Her birth mother had long disappeared. Julian raised her with relentless patience. Where I cautioned, he embraced. Where I questioned, he forgave. That balance made us work, or so I thought. After Julian died, Dahlia hardened. Her sweetness calcified. She called less, smiled less. Until the day I got the diagnosis, sensorineural hearing loss, and suddenly, she reappeared, like a dutiful daughter, with spreadsheets. "Don't worry, Dad. I've got everything handled," she told me, voice full of concern. "Micah can deal with the legal stuff. I'll help manage the accounts." She said it with the same tone she once used to negotiate a curfew. Still, I tried to trust her. Julian would have wanted that. The silence arrived after surgery, and in that silence, something sharpened inside me. A clarity. 2 weeks after, I began wearing the implants. The doctor said my hearing would return in waves. And it did. First, the low buzz of lights, the soft shuffle of curtains, then voices, conversations, secrets. But I didn't tell anyone. Not Micah, not Claudine, our loyal housekeeper of 15 years. I waited. Because the first thing I heard was Dahlia, late at night, just outside my bedroom door.
"I can't keep babysitting this corpse," she snapped. "Micah thinks he's protecting him, but he's weak. You said the paperwork was ready, so make it happen, Laz." Laz. The name sliced through me like a blade. Lazaro Laz Kessler, Julian's former protege. Charismatic. Ambitious. Too slick. After Julian's death, he slithered his way into partial ownership of our firm. Julian had trusted him. I never did. Now he was in bed, figuratively or literally, with my daughter. 2 nights later, she returned. I lay motionless, listening. By next month, I want access to the Zurich Fund, Dahlia whispered. He's not making it to the holidays anyway. Then laughter. Her laughter. Not the giggle from childhood. This was calculated, ugly. It made my chest tighten, my hands shake. How do you grieve a daughter who isn't dead? Julian once told me that love is a choice you keep making, even when it's hard. But betrayal? That's not a choice. It's a revelation.
The next morning, I summoned Micah. When I spoke, he froze. You can hear. Yes, I said. And I need your help. I told him everything, word for word, like a confession at gunpoint. He listened silently, jaw clenched. She's planning something, I finished. With Laz. She's not just planning it, he replied grimly. She's executing it. I nodded. Then it's time to let her believe she's winning. Micah leaned forward. What do you want to do? I want them comfortable, I said. Careless. Let them tighten their noose. He didn't smile, just nodded once. You always were Julian's darker half. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered like a promise. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. Julian had believed in redemption, but I believe in justice. And the silence had taught me how to listen, to lies, to secrets, to hearts cracking under pressure. Now, I was ready to make them pay. Dahlia knocked before stepping into the room, but I didn't respond. I pretended I hadn't heard. And she walked in anyway. Morning, Dad, she chirped, too brightly. You look better. I blinked up at her slowly, my face passive. My hearing had sharpened. I could detect the faintest sound now, the clink of her bangle, the rustle of her coat, the strain in her breath, like she was rehearsing calm and control with every step. Claudine made eggs. Want some? She offered, placing her tote down on the ottoman, not waiting for an answer. The silence between us stretched. Anyway, she sighed. I stopped by the office this morning. Laz says the foundation board is getting nervous. They're asking about the Zurich account again. She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. Cold, methodical. I turned my head slowly, just enough to acknowledge her. Zurich. She froze. A flicker, barely visible, but it was there. You remember Zurich? She asked, smile faltering. Julian and I opened it the year before he died, I replied softly. You were still in college. Her eyes narrowed, but she recovered. Right, it's just, the board wants clarity on access. That's all. Who's the board? I asked. She hesitated. Technically, I am part of it. Laz, too. You appointed us. Wrong. Julian did. And that mistake would cost her everything. That evening, I called Micah. She mentioned Zurich, I said. She's starting to probe. Then the bait is working, he replied. We'll need to accelerate the second trust transfer. Quietly, I said. I don't want Dahlia catching scent. She won't. I've been working with Soraya to isolate the portfolios. Soraya Vance, an estate strategist I trusted with my life. Loyal, discreet, ruthless with numbers. She and Micah had crafted a complex web of trusts and holding companies over the years. It was the kind of fortress you build when you've seen what betrayal looks like in suits and boardrooms. She's watching you, I said. She should.
Micah answered coolly. I'm making it easy for her to think she's ahead. Good. The deeper she feels in control, the harder she'll fall. 3 days later, Laz appeared. He strode into the apartment unannounced, all polished arrogance and designer cologne. Dahlia trailed behind him, eyes bright with something between pride and expectation. Elliot, he nodded. You're looking well. Still deaf, I replied flatly, gesturing to my ear. He chuckled as though amused. Fair enough. He took a seat without being asked, legs crossed, wristwatch catching the light. We've been reviewing your charitable commitments. Some of the legacy donations could be consolidated. It might be a good time to revisit your estate strategy. I tilted my head. Why? Well, he leaned forward, we want to honor your vision, but we also want to be efficient. Dahlia touched his arm gently, too gently. We just want to make things easier for you, she added. The gall of it almost made me laugh. Julian's ghost must have been screaming. I'm tired, I said. Dahlia stood quickly. We'll talk later. As they left the room, I caught it. Laz's hand briefly at the small of her back. Intimacy. Possession. Julian would have been devastated. The next morning, I met Micah in the West Village, a discreet townhouse he used for client meetings. He touched her, I said, pouring scotch into a tumbler despite the hour. Then it's confirmed, he muttered. The trust revisions go into effect Monday. Zurich will be impenetrable. I want them to try, I said. Let them taste power. Micah raised a brow. You're risking a lot, Elliot. No, I replied, eyes sharp. I'm giving them the illusion of risk. There's a difference. Back at the penthouse, Dahlia played the perfect daughter. She brought chamomile tea, offered foot massages, laughed at memories I hadn't shared in years. She was trying to undo her mask, or maybe perfect it. You remember Paris? She asked one night. I nodded. You and Julian took me to that puppet show on Rue Mouffetard. I thought the dragon was real. You carried me home after. She laughed, eyes glassy. I remember, I said, voice low. She leaned in then, forehead resting against mine. You're all I have left, Dad. It almost sounded sincere. Almost. That weekend I gave Claudine the weekend off. She had been increasingly suspicious of Dahlia's sudden affection. You're sure, Monsieur Elliot? She asked in French. I nodded. It's time they think I'm vulnerable. She looked uneasy. Call me if anything seems off. I will. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. At 11:17 p.m., Dahlia tiptoed into the study. I heard the rustle of folders, the creak of the antique drawer Julian used to keep locked, the soft beep of the hidden safe's keypad. Wrong code. She cursed under her breath. Footsteps, another room, another drawer. She was searching for leverage, for access, for control. Micah met me the next morning at the Conservatory Cafe near the Met. She searched the study, I told him. He nodded. Then let's give her what she wants. I handed him a manila envelope. Inside, fake documents, a fabricated access memo, a false key code. She'll think she's outsmarted us, I said, until she realizes she walked into her own trap. The next day, Dahlia returned. I was seated at the window, watching traffic blur below. I have something to tell you, she said carefully. I turned toward her. Laz and we're together, she confessed. I didn't speak. I know it's not what you expected, but he loves me, and I love him. I stared at her until she began to squirm. He respects what you and Julian built.
We just want to help carry it forward. I finally spoke. He's using you. Her jaw clenched. That's not true. Julian warned me about him before he died. But you were too wrapped up in your inheritance to see it. Her face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything, I said softly. I always have. She stormed out, rattled. Perfect. That night I got a message from Micah. She took the bait. The Zurich key code's been accessed, exactly as we planned. I stared out the window, heart steady. The silence was gone. But now, the game had truly begun. The morning after Dahlia accessed the false Zurich credentials, I sat in my armchair, robe drawn tightly around my waist, sipping black tea I had brewed myself. Claudine had returned and stood quietly in the hallway, unsure whether to speak. I waved her off. She understood. Today wasn't a day for small talk. Today, the trap would spring. Micah called me promptly at 8:15 a.m. It's done, he said calmly. She forwarded the credentials to Laz's encrypted inbox. We intercepted it mid-transfer. He opened them. And? He shared them with a shadow broker based out of Belize. We followed the relay chain. Everything's logged. I took a slow sip. The porcelain cup trembled slightly in my grip, not from fear, from restraint. Does the broker know he's walking into a snare? Micah chuckled. He thinks he's rerouting dormant assets. What he's really doing is verifying embezzlement through a holding company that doesn't exist beyond a legal smokescreen. Perfect, I murmured. Let him drown in ghosts. I'll keep layering the firewall. Any blowback lands on Wyvern Holdings, not you. Good. Make sure our legal countermeasures align with SEC protocols. If we're going to do this, we do it cleanly. You'll be a ghost in the paperwork, Elliot. I ended the call and stepped out onto the balcony. Central Park pulsed below with early risers and nannies pushing designer strollers. In their quiet mundanity, they were unaware that just across the avenue, a man was bringing down a gilded empire. Quietly, legally, and without lifting more than a phone. I was winning. Later that morning, Dahlia entered my study without knocking. Her perfume announced her before her voice did, amber and orchid, overwhelming. Laz and I are going to the Montclair Gala tonight, she said, smoothing her blouse like it was armor. We'll be representing the foundation. I looked at her briefly. You've become quite the ambassador. Someone has to handle the image. You've stepped back. I stared at her. She softened her tone. We're not trying to erase you. We're building something new. Make sure to document every donation, I said, interrupting her. Audit trails matter. She frowned. Are you threatening me? I didn't answer. She stormed out without waiting for more. That night I watched the gala live stream from the penthouse. The Montclair was a fortress of old money and performative philanthropy. Attending it was a statement. Dahlia looked radiant in crimson. Laz wore a midnight tux and his signature arrogance. Cameras adored them. Donors smiled at them, but they were dancing over a minefield. Micah had secured every node of Laz's transaction trail. Each time he touched the Zurich data, he cemented his culpability. Every fund reroute, every encrypted message, we had all of it. The beauty of the trap was that I hadn't baited him directly. I had baited Dahlia. Her vanity opened the gate. His greed pushed them both through it. And now they smiled under chandeliers, unaware the fuse was burning beneath their feet. 2 days later, the first spark caught flame. A whisper on a financial ethics blog. Anonymous tipster alleges misappropriation of Elder Care Foundation assets. It spread, first to Reddit finance threads, then into private equity circles, then Bloomberg. The article never mentioned names. It didn't have to. The timing and breadcrumbs were deliberate. Laz called me in a panic. Elliot, we need to speak. I thought you were busy rebranding legacies. There's a mistake. The Zurich accounts. I'm sure the SEC will help clarify things. Silence. Dahlia's worried. She thinks you're angry. She should. I hung up. That evening, Dahlia confronted me in the den. What did you do? She snapped. What I had to. You set him up. You gave him the keys. She stood frozen, breath shallow. I trusted you. No, I said. You trusted in your ability to control me. I thought you were done fighting. I thought you'd moved on. I had, but you brought the war to my doorstep. Her voice cracked. I didn't think you'd turn on me. I didn't. You turned on yourself. She stormed out, but her footsteps didn't echo with anger. They echoed with fear. By week's end, Laz was summoned by the Foundation's Ethics Review Board. A quiet inquiry, no headlines yet. But the internal whispers roared. Donors pulled tentative pledges. One hedge fund delayed disbursement. Dahlia's Instagram, once a carousel of designer causes and rooftop galas, went silent. Micah and I watched the collapse unfold like a slow-motion demolition. Her attorney reached out, he said, looking at his tablet. She wants to quietly resign from the foundation. No, I replied. Micah raised an eyebrow. Going public? No. We drag this through every formal hearing, every newsletter, every board meeting. She wanted the crown. Let her wear the consequences. Understood. Then, without warning, Laz vanished. No press statement, no social media blackout, just gone. Micah tracked the trail to Grand Cayman. Wire transfers, a final burner phone ping, then nothing. The SEC's building a case, Micah informed me. Interpol has interest, but he's in deep water now. Let him rot. Dahlia tried to reach me then. Texts, voicemails, even handwritten letters slipped under the door. I didn't respond. One night, Claudine appeared in the doorway, hesitant. She's in the foyer, she said quietly. Sitting on the marble. Crying. I found Dahlia there, curled at the foot of the staircase, her heels kicked off, face pale. He left me, she whispered. He drained my accounts and disappeared. I don't have anything left. You had everything, I said, and you gave it away. Her eyes widened, glossed with tears. I didn't know. No, you didn't care. She reached out, fingers trembling. I'm still your daughter. I shook my head. Julian was my son, and you discarded his name to chase shadows. She broke then, full sobs. Not theatrical, not manipulative, just grief. I walked away. 2 weeks later, Micah delivered the final package. Zurich is closed. The new trust has been installed with oversight. The ethics committee cleared your name, and your resignation has been sealed. You're clean. And the chair at Columbia? Julian's endowment is active. The lab wing will bear his name. I nodded. What about her? She'll receive a modest inheritance in structured disbursements. No lump sum. Just enough to survive. That's generous. You're a better man than me. I looked out toward the skyline. No, just a man who finally stopped being silent. The first subpoena arrived on a Thursday morning, sealed in a discreet white envelope that Claudine placed silently on the silver tray beside my tea. She didn't ask. She never did. The air had shifted in the Granger penthouse. It smelled less of bergamot and leather, more of scorched paper and coming storms. I opened it with clinical detachment, SEC, internal audit, full asset transparency. The wheels were turning. Dahlia's house of cards,
once propped up by curated charm and thin-lipped half-truths, was finally collapsing under its own rot. I didn't smile. Micah arrived by 9 o'clock, legal pads in hand, his tie already loosened. They're going for a full probe.
Not just Laz. They want everyone who touched the Zurich ledger in the last 18 months. They'll find exactly what we planted, I murmured, scanning the documents. And nothing else. He sat across from me, folding his hands. But Dahlia's name is now on those reports. She's being named as co-signatory on the Montclair disbursement. She'll deny it, claim ignorance. She'll try. We both knew it was coming. But knowledge doesn't dull the blade. It only tells you where it will land. That evening, I reviewed Julian's final recorded lecture. It was a habit I had developed after his death, one that Micah gently labeled masochistic, and I preferred to call grounding. He had spoken about legacy that night, how what we leave behind is not wealth or reputation, but choice. The integrity of a life, he had said, isn't measured by applause or inheritance. It's measured by what you choose when no one's watching. I paused the video, stared into the frozen frame of his warm, determined face, and for a moment, my heart buckled. Then I deleted the file. I no longer needed ghosts to anchor me. I had enemies still breathing. The next morning, Dahlia's lawyer made the first move, a formal request to initiate board restructuring, citing conflict of interest and undue influence by a founding trustee. In other words, me. I laughed. Micah didn't. She's making a play to salvage her reputation, paint herself as the victim. She underestimated how thorough we've been. She's scared, Elliot. People do reckless things when they're drowning. She isn't drowning yet, just flailing. But I knew he was right. Dahlia was wounded, cornered, and desperate to claw back narrative control. She'd begun appearing in social columns again, strategically placed photos at charity brunches, escorted by a new advisor named Renzo Villar. Former political strategist. Too polished, too clean. Laz had been vulgar, greedy. Renzo was dangerous. By the end of the week, my foundation inbox was flooded with anonymous tips and inquiries. Internal whistleblowers, former employees, even one of the Montclair interns, claiming they'd seen documents being shredded after hours. I forwarded everything to Micah. He called that evening, tension clipped into every syllable. Renzo is crafting a defense strategy. They're going to say you orchestrated the embezzlement to cut Dahlia out of succession. I blinked. They'll argue you baited her, gave her access, created false trails, that you used your own daughter as a scapegoat. She's gambling I won't let it go that far. She's gambling you still love her. A pause. Do you? I didn't answer. On Monday, I was summoned to an emergency board hearing. I didn't object. Let them try. The Montclair board was a mix of polished nobles and posturing philanthropists. I wore a dark gray suit, no tie. Micah flanked me like a shadow. Dahlia arrived in ivory. Her hair pulled back into a severe bun, pearl earrings glinting like fangs. Renzo stood behind her, all tailored menace. We appreciate Mr. Granger's presence, Dahlia began smoothly. But I believe this hearing is about transparency. It's time the Foundation untangled itself from private vendettas. Transparency? I said coolly. Is that what you call ghost accounts and fabricated expenses? Her lips tightened. Renzo leaned forward. Mr. Granger, unless you have hard proof. Micah slid a folder across the table. Inside were wire transfer logs, shell account IDs, and encrypted chain of custody receipts, all meticulously documented, all timed to coincide with Dahlia's signature entries. The room froze. One board member muttered, "This is extensive." Renzo paled. Dahlia didn't speak. Her hand trembled as she reached for the folder, then withdrew. Micah leaned in. "We're prepared to testify under oath.
and so are our cybersecurity auditors. I stood. If the board believes I've overstepped, I'll resign. But if you let this corruption rot through the foundation, there won't be a board left to govern. Silence. Then the vote was called, 11-3 in my favor. Dahlia left before the meeting adjourned. That night, Claudine found me in the kitchen, barefoot, staring into a glass of bourbon. "You should eat something," she murmured. "Not hungry." She came by, left something. I turned. What? Claudine hesitated, then handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph, faded, from a decade ago. Julian, Dahlia, and me, on the vineyard balcony in Provence, laughing. No note, just that image. I stared at it for a long time. Then I burned it in the sink. Renzo struck next. The following morning, a confidential tip was leaked to the Times. Billionaire Granger used child's death as public sympathy campaign while funneling assets offshore. It was filth. Obvious. Desperate. But the headline screamed. Micah called mid-sentence. "We're countering now, publishing our audit logs, and I'm contacting Julian's university chair for a formal statement." "Do it." And Elliot. She crossed a line. She's not the one pulling the strings anymore. Renzo had made this personal. He thought I was aging, grieving, slow. He had no idea how long I'd been sharpening knives in silence. I hired a crisis strategist, Amira Doss, ex-CNN reputation sniper. She sat in my study wearing crimson leather and carrying a laptop that looked military grade. "Let's be clear," she said. "You want reputational obliteration, not damage control." "Correct." "Then we're not fighting Dahlia. We're assassinating Renzo's career." I nodded. She smiled. Within 48 hours, Renzo's history was dissected. Misreported PAC contributions, a shadow firm registered in Panama. A recorded but never published podcast episode in which he'd mocked single mothers as branding tools. Amira leaked it all to 5 outlets simultaneously. By Friday, Renzo was toxic. He issued a weak apology. Corporate sponsors dropped him. Political clients ghosted. And just like that, he vanished. I waited for Dahlia to call. She didn't. Instead, she showed up in person. Again. This time, she was alone. She looked smaller. Not physically, but the sharpness was gone. She sat across from me in the study, where Julian's cello still leaned against the window. "Why?" she whispered. "Why destroy him like that?" "He destroyed himself. I just held up a mirror." She looked at her hands. "I lost everything." "No. You lost what you stole. I didn't want it to be like this. Neither did I." For a moment, the only sound was the city far below. Sirens, horns, wind. "I miss him," she said finally. "Julian?" She nodded. "So do I." A long pause. "Can we ever come back from this?" she asked. "No," I said gently. "But we can stop the bleeding." That night, I called Micah. "Create a new clause in the trust. Allow her limited advisory input, but no voting rights. She'll stay on paper, not in power." He whistled. "Merciful." "Not mercy. Strategy. It signals peace. The market likes peace." He paused. "And what about you, Elliot? Are you at peace?" I looked around the study, the shadows, the silence. "I'm getting there." 1 week later, the Granger Foundation held a press conference. I spoke first, reaffirmed our values, clarified our governance restructure, welcomed Amira as our new ethics consultant. Then I introduced the Julian Granger Initiative, fully funded, globally connected, and sealed from internal interference. Dahlia stood beside me, silent, head bowed slightly, no apology, no performance, just acknowledgement. And in that moment, I saw it.
Not redemption, but the beginning of regret. And that was enough. When you spend years mastering restraint, destruction becomes a kind of art. You learn how to inflict damage with precision, controlled burns rather than wildfires. And that week, I painted in ash and silence. Micah was already in my office when I returned from the board review meeting. He didn't look up from the file in his lap. "She's running out of allies," he said. "The Montclair Foundation froze their voting rights this morning. They're citing financial mismanagement and reputational damage. Laz is officially persona non grata." "And Dahlia?" Micah shrugged. "She's left holding the bag, but she's spinning it, claims she was misled, claims she's the victim." Of course she would. The daughter who once paraded through boardrooms in couture and entitlement now wanted to drape herself in pity. But I wasn't done. Not until she learned the cost of betrayal. I walked to the fireplace, lighting it, though it was far from cold. Some days demanded flame. "Let's move forward with the PR release," I said. "The education endowment in Julian's name. Make it loud. Let every article about the scandal be footnoted with his legacy." Micah nodded. "And the gala?" "Proceed. Invite everyone except Dahlia." He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The night of the gala arrived on a gust of early summer wind. The ballroom at the Delacorte was wrapped in black velvet and silver florals. Every face in that room had once toasted my daughter. Now they toasted Julian's name. I stood at the podium beneath the gilded chandelier, the image of Julian's scholarship initiative glowing behind me. "This is for the ones who gave more than they took," I said. "This is for integrity." The applause was thunderous, but my eyes remained dry. The wound Julian left would never heal. But in that moment, the crowd's cheers felt like stitches. When I stepped off the stage, I found Micah waiting near the edge. "She's here," he whispered. "Who?" He tilted his head. Dahlia stood just beyond the ballroom doors. She hadn't come in. She watched from the threshold, a ghost in navy silk. I made no move toward her. "She can watch," I said quietly, "but she will not rewrite history from the inside." Micah glanced at her again. "She looks different." Of course she did. Guilt is a cruel mirror. 2 days later, I received an invitation I didn't expect. A summons from a probate court. Dahlia had filed a motion for fiduciary review, claiming mismanagement of trust assets by the surviving spouse. Me. Micah delivered the news like he was handing me a rotten fish. "She wants a formal audit," he said, jaw tense. "Claims you funneled Julian's death benefit into a private holding account. She's aiming for inheritance fraud." The room was quiet for a long beat. Then I laughed. "She's really going to accuse me of stealing from my dead husband?" Micah was less amused. "It'll make headlines, Elliot." "Let it." "I've documented every transfer, every policy, every beneficiary update Julian authorized. She wants a war of paper. I'll bury her in it." "She's trying to rattle you." "She doesn't know how deep this trench is." I reached into my safe and pulled out the last envelope Julian ever signed. A notarized directive, his instructions for his legacy, handwritten and witnessed. "She can throw stones," I said, "but I built the house, and I built it with steel." Court arrived on a Wednesday, soaked in rain. Dahlia arrived in a tailored charcoal suit, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Beside her, her new attorney, a man too young and too ambitious, carried a folder stuffed with printed accusations. Micah and I sat in the opposite row. No words were exchanged. The judge was an older woman with a sharp tongue and no patience for spectacle. "Miss Granger," she said, addressing Dahlia, "you allege that your father, Elliot Granger, mishandled life insurance proceeds tied to the late Mr. Julian Granger." "Yes, Your Honor. We believe substantial assets were rerouted to personal holdings in the Cayman Islands." "Do you have documentation?" Her lawyer stood,
chest puffed. We have a forensic accounting report suggesting irregularities and 2 witness statements from former estate managers. And Mr. Granger? The judge turned to me. I rose. I have Julian's notarized directive. I have original policy forms, signed by him before his passing. I have quarterly statements from both the domestic and foreign accounts, fully aligned with IRS disclosures. And I have every charitable disbursement verified by the receiving institutions. I handed over the file. Her lawyer reached to object, but the judge raised her hand. Enough. She read for 15 minutes. When she looked up, her tone had shifted. This court finds no evidence of wrongdoing. In fact, it finds a remarkable degree of transparency and integrity. Motion dismissed. Dahlia didn't look at me, but I felt the crack. The mask was crumbling. Later that week, Claudine knocked on my study door. She left something for you, she said. By the foyer. It was a box, not sealed. Inside, photo albums, old letters from Julian, a framed picture of the 3 of us at a vineyard in Tuscany. A time before Laz. Before rot. Beneath it all, a note. I can't erase what I've done, but I wanted you to remember I wasn't always this D. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it in the drawer beside Julian's last letter. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Micah called that afternoon. She's withdrawn from every board. And Laz? Still in hiding. Word is, his assets are frozen in 3 jurisdictions. He's persona non grata everywhere from Geneva to Miami. Perfect. Micah hesitated. There's one more thing. What? She signed over the townhouse. I blinked. She what? She signed a quitclaim deed, gave up her share of the inheritance, full transfer to your name, said she didn't want it anymore. I said nothing. Micah's voice softened. Do you want me to reach out? No, I replied. She needs time and distance. Do you think she regrets it? I think she finally understands it. The gala's success had triggered a ripple across the elite philanthropic circles. Julian's chair at Columbia was inaugurated with a ceremony packed with donors and scientists. A legacy rebuilt, not in marble, but in impact. I stood backstage while they unveiled the portrait of Julian, a candid shot I'd taken one spring in Montauk. His smile wide, eyes filled with wind and sea. Dahlia didn't attend, but she sent flowers, blue hydrangeas, Julian's favorite. Micah nodded toward them. That means something? It means she remembers. One night, weeks later, I found myself alone on the rooftop. The city hummed below, glass towers flickering with secrets. I sipped a glass of vintage Syrah and let my mind drift. This wasn't peace. Not really. Julian was still gone. The ache didn't vanish. It calcified. But what had once been chaos was now clarity. My daughter had betrayed me, but she had also been betrayed. And in the fallout, we had burned down the illusion. All that remained was truth. I heard the door open behind me. Micah. He stood beside me in silence. She's gone, he finally said. Where? Upstate. A program. Not rehab. Something deeper. A kind of retreat. I nodded. Good. She left this. He handed me a letter. I opened it slowly. Dad, I know you won't believe me yet. Maybe never. But I'm trying. Really. Not for you. Not for Julian. For me. Thank you for forcing me to face what I became. I hated you for it. But now I understand. Maybe someday we'll talk again. Maybe not. But I wanted you to know. I see it now. All of it. Dahlia. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest for just a second, then tucked it into my coat pocket. Micah placed a hand on my shoulder. You won, he said. No, I replied. I endured. Dahlia didn't appear at her disbarment hearing. The panel of trustees sat beneath the high ceiling of the Fifth Avenue Cultural Trust's boardroom, their tailored suits and diamond cufflinks belying the gravity of what they had gathered to do. At the head of the table, Miriam Eddings, chairwoman of the board and a veteran of Manhattan's political philanthropy, read the findings aloud in a voice calm and lethal. Misuse of donor-endowed resources, breach of fiduciary duty, and complicity in cross-border financial laundering under the guise of estate liquidation. Micah sat beside me in that room, silently watching the faces turn pale. "They didn't expect this to become public," he whispered. "No one ever does until it's too late," I murmured. When it was over, Miriam folded her hands. "We will remove Dahlia Granger's name from all affiliated titles and grants. She is hereby banned from future dealings with the Foundation." I signed the final order with a Mont Blanc Julian once gave me on our anniversary. The ink flowed smoothly, precise and final, like a scalpel. Outside, protesters held signs about greed and legacy. None of them knew the full truth. They never do. But I wasn't there for them. I was there for Julian, for myself, and for the version of Dahlia who might still be salvageable under the wreckage. Later that afternoon, Micah and I returned to the penthouse. The silence now had a different texture, no longer aching, but deliberate, earned. I poured us both bourbon. Micah accepted his glass, but didn't drink. "Do you feel it yet?" he asked. "What?" "The end. Closure." I stared at the amber liquid in my hand. "No." "Because I know she hasn't reached bottom yet. Dahlia did what the guilty often do. She ran. She left the city, withdrew what little remained in her personal accounts, and disappeared into the quiet corners of upstate New York. I only knew this because Claudine received a postcard postmarked Saratoga Springs. It was unsigned, but Dahlia's handwriting was unmistakable. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I do miss home. I miss him. I said nothing when Claudine showed it to me. I merely folded the card and slipped it into the drawer beneath Julian's urn. Let it sit with the ashes of better days. Meanwhile, Laz Kessler's reckoning unfolded across international lines. The SEC concluded its investigation, citing definitive evidence of misappropriated donor funds, falsified financial channels, and unregistered offshore holdings. His name trended for days, had Kessler collapse, and his photos, once poised and commanding, now looked hollow under courtroom fluorescence. His Cayman assets were frozen. Switzerland refused him refuge. An extradition warrant was issued. "He's got nowhere to go now," Micah reported one morning over espresso. "Interpol's building the net." I sipped slowly. "Good. Let him drown in the silence he built." "But you could testify," Micah added cautiously. "Your testimony could end this faster." I shook my head. This was never about revenge. It was about truth. Let his own actions finish what they started. Micah didn't push me. He never did. In the weeks that followed, I returned to my true work, restoring Julian's foundation, mentoring a new board of directors, and launching the scholarship fund for hearing-impaired youth. We named it the Julian Granger Fund for Auditory Access. Every brochure bore his smiling portrait and the tagline he once jokingly coined, "Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers." When we held the launch gala at the Lincoln Center, the ballroom shimmered with people who had known him, admired him, mourned him. I stood at the podium in midnight navy, looking out at those faces and the empty seat in the front row where Dahlia should have been. "I was once a man who feared silence," I began. "I thought it meant abandonment, disconnection, loss, but I've since learned it can also be a gift, a pause between wrong and right, a chamber where clarity lives." The room fell into reverent stillness. "This fund will not only honor a man who lived with conviction, but it will also serve those who, like him, refuse to let silence define them." I didn't cry. But Micah, sitting beside Claudine, wiped his eyes. 1 week later, a letter arrived, typed, formal, from a public defender's office in Nassau. Mr. Kessler has accepted a plea agreement. He will surrender himself to U.S. authorities within 72 hours. He has offered to testify on co-conspirators, though your name appears only as a protected witness. Micah read it over my shoulder. Looks like he finally caved. Of course he did, I replied. Cowards always do when the spotlight turns inward. What about Dahlia? She won't be named. She helped him. She was played. Micah crossed his arms. And yet you still protected her. I met his gaze. Not for her sake. For mine. For Julian's. Spring turned to early summer, and with it came renewal. The townhouse, once echoing with tension, now hummed softly with the rhythm of healing. Claudine planted hydrangeas in the back courtyard. Micah began staying longer. Sometimes overnight. He never asked for more than I could give. But every morning when I woke up and found him already in the kitchen, making coffee and humming to himself, something in my chest loosened. One morning, he handed me a thin envelope. What's this? It's from her. Inside was a handwritten letter. 2 pages. Careful broken penmanship. No apologies. Just reflections. You were right. About him. About me. I don't expect redemption, but I'm working at a library now, teaching sign language classes on weekends. I haven't touched $1 I didn't earn. That's the truth. For once. No return address. No plea. I placed the letter in the same drawer as her postcard. Beneath Julian's urn, a second stone in a river still finding its direction. Micah stood by the window that night, watching the city lights flicker. Do you think she's really changed? I think she's learning what it costs not to. Would you ever let her back in? I swirled the bourbon in my glass. That's not the question. Then what is? I turned toward him. The question is, when you've finally reclaimed your voice after being silenced for so long, how much of it do you use to forgive? And how much do you use to protect your peace? He nodded slowly. And your answer? I'm still figuring it out. 2 days later, a delivery arrived addressed to Mr. Elliot Granger, founder. Inside was a first edition of Julian's favorite poetry collection, The Sound and the Shape, bound in green leather. Tucked inside was a small card. There's a poem on page 74. I thought you might like it. D. I turned to the page. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is the quiet act of refusing to rot from within. I closed the book, set it on the mantel, and exhaled. 3 months had passed. Spring had matured into early summer on the Upper East Side. The magnolias bloomed late this year, blanketing the sidewalks with petals that looked like they had fallen from another time. I walked those streets more often now, alone, without a driver or companion, cane in hand, not from necessity but from choice. It reminded me of where I'd been, and how far I'd come back. Julian's name was etched in gold leaf above the doors of the new neurological research wing we funded together, the Granger Holt Institute, his legacy untainted and immortal. The trustees had asked me to speak at the dedication, but I had declined. I didn't need applause for keeping a promise. That morning, I returned from my walk and found Micah waiting in the atrium. He was reviewing the latest board restructuring agreements. Everything's finalized, he said, handing me the signed documents. Dahlia's shares are officially relinquished. She has no voting power left. I read over the summary. No surprises. Clean. Surgical. And the trust for her living expenses? Active and automated. She can't access more than a modest allowance monthly. She's moved to a townhouse in Cobble Hill. Quiet. Discreet. I nodded. Good. Let her rebuild. Or not.
Micah hesitated.
She asked to see you. I looked out toward the bay windows where sunlight spilled across Julian's old grand piano. She doesn't need my forgiveness. She needs time. And Laz will rot somewhere he can't spell. Micah smiled faintly, then exhaled. That's everything. No, it's not, I said, and placed my hand on his shoulder. There's one more thing. He followed my gaze to a sealed box on the credenza, engraved with Julian's initials. Today's his birthday. Micah's throat tightened. I'm taking him back to Lake Kindred, I said softly, scattering the last of his ashes there, alone. He stepped back. You want me to arrange travel? No, I said. I'll drive myself. He opened his mouth, paused, then nodded. Understood. Lake Kindred shimmered like glass by late afternoon. The house had been cleaned months ago but kept untouched since. No one had stayed since the memorial. Julian's linen shirts still hung in the armoire. The pressed petals of a white lily, dried between the pages of his poetry book, lay on the nightstand untouched. I brought the urn to the water's edge. The wind stirred lightly. I kept everything, Jules, I whispered. The company, your name, the chair at Columbia, even Dahlia's soul, though you wouldn't have asked for that. I crouched low and let the ash meet the waves. I'm sorry I didn't hear you that day you said goodbye, but I've heard you every day since. Silence followed. Not the kind that used to haunt me, but a gentle kind. The kind that fills in the spaces where grief used to sit. As the last of the gray dust disappeared into the rippling water, I stood, stronger than I had been in years. I can finally let go. Back in Manhattan the next evening, the penthouse hummed with quiet again. Claudine passed by with a tray of herbal tea and fresh scones, as if nothing in the world had shifted. You're early, she said gently. Felt like home again. She paused, then said, There was a note left for you. It was in Dahlia's handwriting. I'm sorry, I can't take it back, but I can learn from it. Thank you for not destroying me completely. I hope one day I deserve even a hello from you again. D. I folded the note and placed it in Julian's old music journal. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder, even ruins could grow things again. That night I sat on the piano bench and touched the keys softly. The first few notes of his favorite piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Then a voice from the hallway interrupted the melody. I didn't know you played again. Micah. I don't, I said. I remember. He crossed the room, paused beside me, uncertain. I've been thinking, he said, about next steps. Oh? The board wants you to resume your chairmanship. Full authority. No interim tag. I tilted my head. And what do you think? I think you've earned peace, he said. But if you choose power again, it'll be on your terms now. Not Julian's. Not the past's. I nodded slowly. What about you? I asked. I'm not going anywhere, he replied. If you'll have me. I looked at him, saw the loyalty, the steadiness, no ambition behind the eyes, just grounding. Then let's build something honest, from scratch. Together? Yes, I said. Together. Months passed, then nearly a year. Julian's name remained spoken in boardrooms, at university lectures, in anonymous donor circles. The foundation recovered, its mission purer than it had been in decades, and though Dahlia remained distant, quiet in her Cobble Hill retreat, I occasionally received letters, unopened, but not discarded. Then one late autumn afternoon, I found myself walking through the Central Park Conservatory, and there she was, Dahlia, sitting on a bench near the koi pond, a journal in her lap, hair pinned back simply. She saw me. She didn't rise. She didn't wave.
I walked past her, not a word, but after a few steps, I turned back. I loved you, Dahlia, I said gently. Still do. She swallowed. I know. But I also loved Julian, and what you did, I know, she whispered. You'll have to build your life from zero. No crutches, no shortcuts. Do it right or don't bother. She nodded once. I understand. I turned again and walked away, this time without stopping. That winter, Micah and I traveled to Vienna. We toured the opera houses Julian had loved, drank black coffee in the cafes he used to sketch in. One night, as snow dusted the cobblestone street outside, I turned to Micah in the firelit warmth of our suite. You know, I said, there's a silence I don't mind anymore. He looked up from his book. Which kind? The kind that doesn't hurt. He smiled. That's the only kind worth having. We clinked glasses. Outside, the world went on. Colder, yes, but honest. And I was finally whole. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper. They slip through cracks, weaving themselves into the quiet moments, into the glances not returned, the silences not explained, the phone left face down on the table. But in time, even the most devastating fractures can teach us what no gentle lesson ever could. That silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's awareness. This story wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about recognition. The brutal kind. The kind that strips away illusion until all that remains is truth. When someone close tears apart your trust, it doesn't just break your heart. It challenges your very perception of who you are and who they were. You question every memory, every moment, and every word spoken in the dark. But eventually, you stop asking why it happened and begin asking what to do with the ashes. Because healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before. It means choosing not to let the pain define you. It means protecting the legacy of what truly mattered, while refusing to carry the poison of what didn't. And it means building a life rooted not in what you've lost, but in what you've survived. There is a quiet kind of strength in choosing dignity over destruction. In walking away not with thunder, but with calm. In saying nothing, but meaning everything. When justice arrives, it doesn't always wear armor or raise a sword. Sometimes, it wears a quiet smile. And sometimes, the greatest punishment is letting someone live with their choices while you move forward, untethered. We often talk about closure like it's a door you slam shut, but more often, it's a window you open, a breath you take, a morning when the past no longer weighs more than the present. When the silence that once hurt becomes the very space where peace begins. In the end, victory is not just found in reclaiming power or in watching those who wronged you fall. It's found in choosing who you become after the storm. Do you become bitter or do you become better? Do you build walls or do you plant gardens? The journey is rarely clean. Pain leaves residue, but every scar is a record of survival, and every choice to rise again is a declaration, I was not destroyed. Thank you for walking through this story with us, from heartbreak to healing, from deception to strength. If a moment spoke to you, if you saw a reflection of yourself or someone you love, we'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments. Your stories make this community real, and your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful journey like this one. Until next time, take care of your heart, trust your silence, and never forget your worth. We'll see you again soon.